fundamentals of what Russia said they needed have not changed. And I can't even imagine that they would change right now. So that leaves then what is Zelensky to do? In my estimation, that he has just lost the ability to have a rational assessment of reality when it comes to having this war come to an end. He has got in his mind that, no, I'm not going to give up any of these key things. No denazification, no demilitarization, no giving up of territories, and I get security guarantees. That's impossible. It is impossible. It's not even in the realm of theoretical. So for him to continue to be saying that on the eve of coming into this shows you that he's just lost the ability to connect to reality. And so that's why I think Trump is going to have to be in a position to just say, okay, I've laid it out. I've given you the option. You haven't agreed to it. So the only thing I've got left is to just walk and take everything away from you, because I don't believe that he has the capacity, Zelensky, to make a rational choice, because what you've laid out is a rational choice. For the betterment of your people, as the leader of your country, you have an obligation to sacrifice your own interest and your own preference to doing what is going to be the least coercive and bad for your people. And right now, if there was a deal to be had that would have preserved their security and safety, that came in probably the last chance in December 2021, and none since then. And every time he's had the chance to limit the damage to his country, he has failed to do so. He has refused to do so. And so it's hard for me to imagine that he's going to willingly do so now. I'm sure he'll try to put a good face on it, but I don't think that he has the capacity. So that's why it's either U.S. and Europe, or the U.S. is going to have to step in and say, okay, if you can't make the call, we're going to make it for you. Because if we're leaving it up to Zelensky, I don't think he has the capacity to make the rational choice.
Do you think Trump's push to suddenly now meet with Putin, again, keep in mind he had this 50-day deadline, it became a 10-day deadline, and then suddenly he had to make a meeting with Putin within a week. And then do you think this is from the poor situation on the front lines? I mean, how severe is it?
I do. I think that that's certainly a big factor in it. I think another factor would be that probably behind the scenes, Trump's senior advisors, especially his economic advisors, said, Mr. President, this ain't going to do anything. This is, these so-called bone-crushing sanctions that Lindsey Graham wants to put in, they're not going to be bone-crushing. And when you talk about secondary tariffs on China and Brazil and India, though, that's a losing proposition for us. That would cost us a lot. We're already in very difficult economic negotiations with these people on tariffs, et cetera. And to throw something like this on them would undermine our position, and it would cost us. It's not going to change Russia's position. It's unlikely to even alter, like, say, India or Brazil. They were both very angry about this and had talked openly about countermeasures were these things to go into effect. And I think that probably the Trump realized that, all right, that's not a winning play here. We got to do something different. And I think that, along with what's happening on the battlefield, because you see, even overnight, Russia continues its air campaign. They continue on the ground. They had a penetration north of Pokrovsk a week or so ago that the Ukraine side was able to blunt and stop for the moment. But now Russia has been apparently also putting in additional forces, and they're now starting to eke some of that back. Whereas also north in the Kupiansk area and Zaporizhia area, and in some of the other Chasiv Yar area, et cetera, they continue to be moving forward. Konstantinivka, they've apparently, Russia has moved into the outskirts of the city itself in the last 12 hours or so. So they continue to press all along the front line there, and the manpower thing it's just not going to change. The dynamics continue. The Ukraine suffers more losses each month than they were able to force mobilize in there, and those forced mobilization are of very poor quality now. And of course, the desertions you add on top of that, just the numbers there and the maps just are never going to work. So Trump doesn't have the leverage to push that. So I think instead he's calculated, all right, this is the best thing we can get done for our interest, and not throwing more money and more ammunition and everything else away on a losing prospect. I think all that went in together too.
Yeah. But what do you see the chances of the Europeans being able to fill the shoes of the United States in terms of taking over its war support? Because the US is not just supplying weapons, logistics, intelligence, training. There's a lot being put into this, and the whole premise of I guess ability of the Europeans to convince Zelensky to keep the war going depends on the Europeans convincing Zelensky that they can keep this war going without the Americans. Is this realistic?
Yeah, I think that you have a symbiotic relationship with Ukraine and Europe. I'm not. I know that oftentimes Zelensky's characterized as being the puppet and all this, and sometimes I wonder who's pulling whose strings. I'm not really think it's clear. I think it's a sort of a mutual abusive situation, if you will forgive the analogy,
Yeah.
because I think that it is clear that Europe has wanted this war to continue on at almost any cost. That's why they have been putting so much political capital into getting Trump on board, because they want the war to continue on. There is no rational path that Europe can ever even claim that eventually this would work out to our advantage, that this would create something where Ukraine could carve out some kind of military victory, because all the fundamentals that go into wars of attrition, you can take the emotion out of it. It's just black and white how this stuff works out. It's virtually impossible for it to work any other way. And yet they have continued to go down that path. And Zelensky has been enthusiastic about continuing it himself. I've talked to some Ukrainian people, and there are some in Ukraine, and I suspect that Zelensky's one, that hold out to this miracle mentality. Well, we just have to live today. We just have to fight another day, because tomorrow some miracle could happen. Some weapon can be happening. Some coup could happen in Russia. They could have an uprising. They could finally get tired. Fill in the blank. Stuff that's irrational, but you're just grasping for miracle straws here. And as long as they can keep fighting another day, they'll keep going down that path. Problem with that is math does still apply. Physics do still apply. And at some point that fight another day will collapse, and you won't be able to fight the rest of this day, and you will lose everything. That is what they are risking. And so I think that the only hope is that President Trump stays firm and keeps that steel backbone and just tells the European Union as a whole, this is the deal. Get on board or you've got it all. And I don't think, if it push comes to shove, I think the Europeans, as much as they want the war to go on, recognize they don't have the wherewithal to do this. It would bankrupt them, and they would lose. And then they would be seen as even weaker than they were. And then people would say, NATO is useless. It's pointless. They could literally lose everything if they keep going down that path. We'll see what they choose.
Well, one of the most significant thing we heard from Trump after the meeting with Putin, though, was that he walked away from his demand for an unconditional ceasefire, and he took Putin's position that yes, we do need to address the root causes to finally end this war, and he spelled out as well, no NATO. But within the United States, so this is not a very popular position. When I say within the United States, I mean within the US or Washington, the political class, they seem very European at heart in terms of wanting to still continue this war. How much pushback is there from the US establishment, and how does that affect Trump's ability to maneuver here?
Well, it definitely does. And I think that in the U.S., I always refer to this as the uni-party, political, Republican or Democrats. It doesn't make any difference. They're pretty much all the same, both the elite. So we call it the uni-party. So it's kind of a foreign policy. It's a terrible one. Really runs among the ruling elite here. And I think that there's a lot of continuity, maybe even some direct cooperation between the European elite as well. So in that sense, it's maybe even a bigger uniparty than you can imagine. They have certainly all been, and during the Biden administration, they were all together on just perpetuating the war, even though they intellectually, many of them anyway, knew that it could never be won, but just fighting the war is a success all in its own. And they had no moral qualms with the fact that Ukraine was swimming in blood from their own people and the destruction of their country. They seemed to be fine with that as long as Russia was hurt, which I find one of the most immoral positions that can be held. So the real question is going to be, to your answer to your question, is how strong can Trump be? Because he is the counter elite in some respects. Others he hasn't. I mean, he has kept this war going. He didn't end it in 24 hours, because all the things I'm saying he should do today, he could have done on the 21st of January. He had the ability to do that, and he didn't then. He did allow them, a lot of these people, to convince him to just keep kicking the can down the road. Now here we are, late August, and the question is going to be, is it going to get kicked down the road again, or is he finally going to firm up and say, this is the end of the road? I'm crushing the can now. You're either going to get on board or you're on your own. it's going to take something like that because nothing else is going to stop it. And the elite can be upset. They can try to sabotage things, do whatever, but then it all comes down to how strong can Trump be as an individual leader, because he does have the capacity to push against all of that stuff. We'll see if he does.